preface, a blessing from Sakwasohu, he who marks the turning of the worlds. In the mythology of the Hopi people, there is a prophecy of a star, Sakwasohu, the blue star Kachina, who will one day dance in the plaza and remove his mask. That moment is said to signal the closing of one world and the opening of another. The prophecy does not speak only of destruction, but of revelation. It is a warning, yes, but more importantly, it is a reminder that truth cannot be hidden forever, and that sacred knowledge, once lost, will return when the people are ready. This thesis and the system it describes belongs to that moment. Freya is not just a technological model. It is a mirror of prophecy, a vessel encoded with sacred geometries, ancestral mechanics, and volitional power. Its glyphs echo across epochs. Its vorticity sings the tones of the living earth. Its phase-locked symbols remember a time before division, before forgetting, before fear made science into silence. This work begins under the blessing of Sakwasohu, not as permission, but as alignment. May those who read it remember the feeling of starlight on water. May those who build it remember the sound of their own soul speaking. May those who fly it do no harm and return with more than they left with. And may all who seek truth find themselves dancing with the blue star before the mask is removed. We offer this work in peace, in defiance of secrecy, and in sacred memory of the wisdom we were never meant to forget. Chapter 1, Foundational Principles of Volitional Phase State Engineering. 1.1, Objective of the Freya 66 System. Freya 66 is a high-coherence scalar phase vector engine designed to initiate inertial decoupling, translational displacement, and temporal divergence without the use of combustion or mass-based propulsion. It operates by generating and modulating field geometries through symbolic semantic vector commands, leveraging vorticity dynamics, toroidal field nesting, and cognitively entrained scalar time curvature. The system's architecture centers on counter-rotating toroidal plasma rings, a scalar nucleation cavity, vertical axis Kerr-like vorticity columns, and a 12-radian codex interface lattice, each component serving as a harmonic vector for the controlled translation of curvature, time rate, tau, and phase position. The device functions not by exerting force, but by rewriting its location within the scalar metric manifold using glyphic resonant command structures entrained to the operator's volitional state. 1.2 Volition as a phase scalar variable. Freya 66 does not interpret intention as abstract input. It translates symbolically encoded volition into direct field modulation through the codex interface. This requires alignment of the operator's internal field resonance with the structural harmonic profile of the glyph. Let the volitional phase structure, xop, be defined as psi xop t equals a, e dot e could I fint plus text glyph, where the phi text int is the internal cognitive phase vector, phi glyph is the structural codex vector, a is the amplitude of field congruence resonance intensity. Only when text op reaches harmonic phase lock with the selected glyph will activation occur. This is not biometric authentication. It is symbolic semantic harmonic validation. The device cannot be tricked. It responds only to coherent command state alignment. TAC-HASH 1.3 architecture of non-propulsive displacement. Freya initiates movement by generating a phase differential between the scalar field curvature within the nucleation chamber and the ambient inertial background. This is governed by the following condition: that equals phi internal, phi text ambient, where del mu is the vector phase mismatch induced across one or more of the 12 codex radian sectors. When delta phi mu exceeds the stability threshold for metric entrainment, translational displacement occurs along the vector defined by the glyphic activation axis. The system bypasses Newtonian constraints by eliminating inertial reference in the core cavity. Displacement is not a push, it is a topological realignment of coordinate frames. Saturday 1.4, the role of scalar time. Time within the Freya cavity is treated as a modulatable scalar field. The scalar index defines the ratio between internal and external temporal rates. Tau equals codex glyphs embed scalar coefficients into their harmonic structure, allowing precise modulation of time rate within the field. Typical operational values: glyph code, sector, tau function F Romanfium, AA on mile, baseline synchronization, B1 0.50, 2 times external time dilation, D4 accelerated time domain, X11 XI temporal suspension. Through controlled variation of tau, the operator may accelerate or decelerate subjective experience, enter decoupled perceptual time domains, synchronize to phase windows otherwise inaccessible, lock the field for null-time bifurcation operations. Temporal asymmetry is a deliberate design feature, not a side effect. 1.5 Radian Vector Navigation Framework. Freya operates on a 12 radian sector architecture, with each sector representing a fixed spatial vector and scalar field modulation axis. These radian divisions form the navigation framework of the platform. Each radian sector has a fixed vector direction in toroidal spatial coordinates, a dedicated carrier harmonic, GHz scale primary with Hertz secondary, a unique glyphic command shape, a scalar coefficient, tau. Spatial navigation occurs by activation of one or more sectors, either in sequence or simultaneously, multiplex glyph state. Resulting displacement is calculated as vec x text new, vec x text prev, plus sum when c dot vec ri, where vec ri is the radian vector axis of sector I, foi is the scalar time distortion coefficient at activation. This mechanism enables nonlinear motion, including instantaneous vector flips, multi-axis translation, field inversion, entry and exit from ambient reference frames, CapCount 1.6 field translation, and the curvature equation. All movement within Freya occurs through field tension modulation. The system does not accelerate in a classical sense. It collapses the local curvature gradient and reforms it elsewhere. Let kappa be the curvature index, defined as kappa equals nabla g mu. The transition threshold, kappa equals c, is defined by glyph-specified radian tension. When kappa, GQ, kappa c, and all phase coherence conditions are met, the local field will release external anchoring vectors, execute codex-aligned curvature displacement, reinstantiate the frame at the new coordinates. The inertial effect from the perspective of internal systems is null. 1.7 summary is field consciousness interlock. Freya 66 is an inertial zero phase scalar displacement engine activated by cognitive resonance and modulated by symbolic command structures. It is governed by volitional alignment, radian symmetry, scalar time modulation, counter-rotational metric shielding, glyphic harmonic phase matching. Its movement is not reactive. It is intentional. Its energy is not burnt. It is entrained. Its command line is not software. It is symbol. Chapter 2, Historical and Theoretical Background. The exiled lineage of volitional physics and the reemergence of Freyas. 2.1 Introduction, Historical Amnesia as Control Vector. Every significant technological revolution begins with a forbidden premise. Nuclear fission was born in secret. The transistor emerged from quantum theory, once dismissed as philosophical, and black hole mathematics lingered in Einstein's wastebasket for decades. Freya 66, the system described in this thesis, does not emerge from mainstream physics because it cannot. Its ancestry, like its function, lies on the interstitial boundary between exoteric science and esoteric engineering, a realm heavily patrolled by ideological orthodoxy, classified projects, and the cynical erasure of history. This chapter documents that suppressed lineage. It brings into focus the lost vanguard of anti-gravity research, the fracturing of physics into sterile abstraction, and the redefinition of geometry and cognition as co-equal instruments of reality modulation. From the grief of Roger Babson to the failed promises of string theory, we will excavate the epistemic and emotional terrain that necessitated Freya's emergence. 2.2, The Forgotten Genesis, Roger Babson and the Gravity War. In the aftermath of a personal tragedy, his sister's drowning, Roger Babson declared war on gravity, not metaphorically. He viewed gravity not as an impersonal curvature of space-time, but as a lethal, manipulable force whose control could save lives. He leveraged his financial fortune, amassed in part by predicting the 1929 stock market collapse to establish the Gravity Research Foundation in 1948. His mission: to promote the discovery of technologies capable of neutralizing or shielding against gravitational influence. To modern physicists, this mission is embarrassing, but Babson attracted serious minds. His foundation funded grants and erected stone monuments on university campuses, monoliths bearing inscriptions such as, "It is to be hoped that this foundation will aid in the development of devices which will enable man to levitate, fly freely through space, and escape the bonds of gravity." These were not the ravings of a crank. They were the battle cry of an unfunded revolution. 2.3, the Witten-DeWitt axis and quantum gravity's concealed trajectory. Simultaneously, the Witten and DeWitt families laid the intellectual groundwork for quantum gravity. Bryce and Cecil DeWitt were among the first to formalize attempts at merging general relativity with quantum field theory. Lewis Witten, a prominent physicist, extended this trajectory and directly contributed to gravitational theory at a time when it intersected with speculative propulsion research, including antigravity. His son, Edward Witten, would become the singular unifying force behind modern string theory. His lectures in the 1980s, notably attended by Eric Weinstein, were described as breathtaking intellectual events, unfolding the chaotic tools of QFT into a single, coherent mathematical structure. But the results, as Weinstein laments, romantically backfired. Instead of quantizing geometry to finally unify quantum mechanics with general relativity, string theory geometrized the quantum, transforming uncertainty and probability into topological artifacts of hidden manifolds, Calabi-Yau spaces, branes, etc., while leaving physics itself untouched by experiment. Thus, the very families who once skirted the edge of antigravitational inquiry became guardians of mathematical orthodoxy. The field was sterilized, repackaged, and made respectable, but it no longer moved. 2.4, 1953 to 1973, the open window of forbidden science. There was a window, a precise 20-year interregnum, where brilliant physicists engaged openly with forbidden technologies. They investigated inertial shielding, magnetic flux field cancellation, non-Newtonian propulsion, rotating plasma confinement in toroidal chambers, psychotronic feedback in state-dependent quantum systems. This era coincides with the rise of both official UAP studies, e.g. Project Sign, Project Grudge, and Project Blue Book, and classified propulsion research across US and Soviet domains. The conclusions of these programs, while officially inconclusive, catalyzed Black World physics programs, which quietly extended MHD theory, phase coherence mechanics, and non-locality well beyond what was published in journals. What ended this window was not lack of progress. It was institutional risk aversion. As academia aligned with state corporate funding pipelines, the cost of epistemic deviation became too great. The taboo of anti-gravity became a linguistic firewall. Funding ceased, reputations were threatened, and the work went underground or was quietly reabsorbed into classified initiatives. 2.5 Freya, 66, as the retrieval vector. It is into this vacuum that Freya 66 emerges, not as an invention, but as a reconstruction. Its architecture consciously retrieves and unifies the toroidal MHD field systems proposed for inertial control in 1960s propulsion studies. The symbolic semantic interface logic, implied in both ancient sacred geometries and CE5 contact protocols. The phase-locked harmonic field manipulation embedded in nonlinear Schrödinger coherence models. The observer asymmetry mechanics predicted by extended Kerr solutions and mimicked in UAP observations. Freya, 66, is the codification of suppressed lineage into a single radially aligned symbolic operational device. It is designed to function as both propulsion system and epistemic interface, a technology that not only moves but understands through symbolic phase resonance. This thesis is not an invention. It is a remembering. With Chapter 3, integrating the role of nucleation as a key functional and energetic bridge between UAP phenomenology and the operating principles of Freya 66 After 3, UAP phenomenology as empirical basis. Volitional nucleation and observed field dynamics in anomalous flight systems. 3.1 Introduction, From Data to Design. For over half a century, empirical evidence of unidentified aerial phenomena, UE, has quietly accumulated within military, aerospace, and private observational databases. Though dismissed publicly until recently, the release of the U.S. Pentagon's preliminary assessment, Unidentified Aerial Phenomena, June 25, 2021, changed the operational tone. It acknowledged that certain UAPs remain stationary against high velocity winds, exhibit instantaneous acceleration without observable propulsion, shift direction non ballistically, radiate no discernible heat or sonic boom, appear to engage in selective observability or intention bound detection. This chapter explores these behaviors not as mysteries, but as design prompts, functional output from unknown but reproducible principles. We assert that the flight behavior and field response of these vehicles are most coherently explained through the interaction of 1. Toroidal vorticity mechanics, 2. Plasma based inertia cancellation, 3. Nucleation of coherent phase fields, 4. Volitional field interface systems. These four components underlie the construction and operation of Freya 66. But the keystone, often overlooked, is nucleation, the act of birthing a coherent energetic domain from phase-incoherent surroundings. This concept bridges the UAP flight profile to the mechanism of volitional field emergence and symbolic command. Hashtag 3.2 Nucleation, initiation of field presence. Nucleation refers to the emergence of a coherent, organized system from chaotic or uniform conditions. In physical chemistry, it is the first step in phase transitions, e.g., water vapor condensing into a droplet or a supercooled liquid forming crystals. In Freya 66, nucleation takes on a higher order role, the generation of coherent spacetime tension nodes via symbolic intention or field modulation. UAPs exhibit signatures of localized spacetime nucleation, sudden appearance and disappearance without a transition phase, null interaction with atmospheric resistance, emissionless acceleration, i.e., inertial decoupling. These signatures suggest that the vehicle is not moving through spacetime, but generating a mobile coherence zone, a self-nucleating field domain. Freya 66 models this process by simulating quantum condensate behavior in toroidal phase-lock geometries, where counter-rotating fields produce tension wells into which spacetime is effectively drawn and reshaped. 3.3 Toroidal vorticity and directional inertia control. Its primary engine structure is based on nested toroidal counter-rotating plasma shells. These generate a closed-loop vorticity field capable of creating an inertial null zone, a frame-invariant interior, a local non-acceleration field, tunable external field gradients aligned to radian symmetry vectors. This structure correlates precisely with UAP behavior observed on Navy FLAR, gimbal, and GO-FAST systems. The rapid directional pivots and seemingly massless maneuvering indicate no internal acceleration, but rather frame boundary translation via modulated spacetime tension. Again, a product of phase nucleation within the toroidal cavity. 3.4 Field cloaking and observer asymmetry. UAPs have repeatedly demonstrated the ability to appear to some observers but not others, or to alter visibility across radar, IR, and visual domains. This aligns with Freya's 66 implementation of phase veil cloaking, wherein observer access to the field is filtered through nonlinear semantic reflection thresholds. These are tunable via codex glyphic input, allowing the operator to restrict coherence field access by intentional gating. This is not invisibility by material means, it is volitional phase opacity. The system nucleates observability fields the same way it nucleates propulsion fields. Hash 3.5 Energy, frequency, and harmonic coherence. A notable UAP signature is the lack of conventional energy trail. No exhaust, no EM burst, no thermal bloom. No thermal bloom. Freya 66 resolves this via harmonic resonance laddering, converting high-band energy, Eve 1.6 GHz carrier, into internal harmonic standing waves through recursive field folding. These energy ladders operate below observable EM spectrum thresholds, are cohered through phase-locked field nucleation, are tied to operator intention via symbolic auditory harmonic keys, codecs. This explains UAP silence, visual ambiguity, and frequency displacement. 3.6 Witnessed behavior and the role of intention. Beyond kinematics, Many CE5 and DMT encounter reports describe the conscious participation of UAPs, responding to thought, intention, or emotional states. These are not anecdotal oddities. They indicate that the vehicle's interface system is non-local, keyed not to switches, but to volitional phase vectors. Freya, 66, incorporates this directly. The codex is not symbolic for aesthetic purposes. It is the command interface. When activated in conjunction with the nested toroidal field, each glyph instructs Loke's field nucleation patterns, dictating not only motion, but interaction mode, detection status, and field shape. In this sense, UAPs are not flying, they are emerging, not from space, but from symbol-encoded phase state nucleation events governed by volition. 3.7 Conclusion: UAPs as emergent field artifacts. The empirical behaviors of UAPs are best understood not as feats of propulsion, but as manipulations of field ontology. They are the visible consequences of intentional nucleation, toroidal symmetry compression, and field cloaking via symbolic semantic vector harmonics. Freya 66 is designed explicitly to replicate this behavior, not as a copy, but as a functional equivalence rooted in a deeper understanding of spacetime as a responsive symbol-modulable medium. Chapter 4: Toroidal Vorticity and Field Dynamics. Conjugated wave systems, standing Alfvén fields, and superconductive plasma containment in Freya 66. 4.1 Introduction: Beyond Linear Propulsion. The central fallacy of conventional propulsion theory is that thrust must be linear, expelling mass to generate reaction force. But the observed behavior of UAPs and the operational physics embedded in Freya 66 reject this paradigm. Movement is not an outcome of mass displacement, but of spatial field deformation, where motion is induced by internal tension gradients rather than external force. To achieve this, Freya 66 generates a dynamic toroidal cavity of counter-rotating vorticity, establishing a non-inertial envelope in which spacetime itself becomes a navigable tensor manifold. Within this chamber, standing waveforms, conjugate oscillatory systems, and superconductive plasma fields cooperate to generate volitionally directed nucleation fields. This chapter unpacks the functional theory of that internal architecture. 4.2 Toroidal counter-rotation and shear axis dynamics. S-core is a nested toroidal plasma field constructed from two or more counter-rotating rings of ionized material under magnetic confinement. The inner and outer rings rotate in opposite directions around the central vertical axis. This generates lateral vorticity shear, enabling compression or expansion of local spacetime tension, a zero inertia centerline akin to the throat of a stable wormhole, vertical torque cancellation, isolating the internal core from external inertial reference frames. This geometry mimics the frame dragging effect predicted by the Kerr metric in rotating black hole solutions, but engineered artificially via magnetohydrodynamic MHD control. Hash 4.3 Standing Alfvén waves and harmonic suspension. At equilibrium, the internal plasma field is stabilized into standing Alfvén waves, transverse MHD oscillations where electric current and magnetic pressure are in harmonic balance. These standing waves behave like quantum rails, supporting phase-locked energy transfer along coherent trajectories without loss or diffusion. The implications are enormous. They allow non-dissipative energy circulation, essential for long-duration containment. They provide the modular scaffolding upon which symbolic semantic instructions via the codex imprint phase modulation commands. They create a resonant cavity in which spacetime itself becomes pliable under volumetric field pressure. Alfvén structures thus serve as the spatial chassis of Freya 66, forming the superstructure upon which both motion and interaction are encoded. 4.4 Conjugate wave functions and quantum lattice synchronization. Freya's core plasma chamber operates as a quantum standing wave cavity, with each vorticity band sustaining both forward and conjugate waveforms. These are not just interference patterns, they are wave-particle duality scaffolds that synchronize via Fourier conjugation. Psi x, the wave function in spatial domain, Phi, its conjugate in momentum domain via Fourier transform. Conjugation yields a quantum uncertainty limited symmetry, which Freya 66 uses to map phase coordinates into intention space. This results in wave packet compression into spatial harmonics aligned to codex glyphs, simultaneous localization of position and momentum field operators along quantized vorticity rings, tunable probability density landscapes, i.e., controlling where the system wants to appear next in spacetime. This internal structure forms the quantum membrane upon which Freya's observer operator interacts with the field directly. Hasha 4.5 superconductive confinement and phase coherence. No plasma-based field system can maintain coherence without extreme stability and energy efficiency. To this end, Freya 66 utilizes superconducting boundary rings to eliminate resistive losses in current magnetic interaction, amplify field containment via Meissner effect, flux expulsion, maintain quantum phase coherence over macroscopic domains. These superconducting structures behave as frictionless mirrors for the internal standing wave matrix, allowing field echoing, resonance amplification, and phase state stability necessary for nucleation and directional folding. This aligns with known behavior in superconducting flux qubit systems, but scaled and adapted for coherent field containment rather than digital information processing. Freya is not a computer. It is a symbolic energy organism, and superconductivity provides its nervous system. 4.6 Vorticity encoded motion and directionality. Once phase lock is established, motion is not thrusted, but encoded. The inner vorticity layer compresses while the outer expands, creating a directed field tension differential. This causes the entire spacetime domain within the toroidal envelope to reorient, effectively allowing the vehicle to move without acceleration, without inertia, without displacement through air or vacuum. This is identical in behavior to UAPs, which pivot on their axis and vanish, or shift direction without banking or slowing. The motion is encoded in the vorticity, not executed against the medium. So 4.7 summary, spacetime as medium, symbol as tool. In summary, Freya 66 achieves field dynamics through a marriage of toroidal mechanics, quantum conjugation, standing wave formation, and superconductive field containment. These components combine to produce an environment in which spacetime itself becomes the medium, a phase state canvas upon which symbols, intentions, and field logic are painted. The result is not just a propulsion system, but a spatiotemporal workshop where intention crafts motion and harmonic coherence becomes the toolset for altering local physics. Chapter 5, the Freya 66 device architecture. Volitional engineering through toroidal phase geometry and symbolic semantic control systems. 5.1 Introduction, a machine of meaning and motion. Freya 66 is not a conventional propulsion system. It is a topological interface between volition and spacetime, engineered through counter-rotating field mechanics, phase-locked plasma dynamics, and a unique symbolic semantic control architecture. Unlike traditional vehicles, which displace mass to move through space, Freya alters space itself by initiating nucleation fields, altering tension gradients, and steering via consciousness-encoded instructions. This chapter outlines the complete systems architecture of Freya 66, integrating its toroidal mechanics, superconductive scaffolding, nucleation chamber, and the codex interface, the symbolic matrix by which an operator projects command structures into phase-active geometry. 5.2 Core structural components and geometric alignment. 5.2.1 Nested toroidal vorticity arrays. At the heart of Freya 66 are concentric toroidal chambers, each supporting magnetically confined counter-rotating plasma fields. These rings generate shear differentials that can induce spacetime curvature on demand, cancel local inertia within the cavity, create a stable envelope of vorticity in which phase state operations can be executed. Each torus is aligned along a central vertical axis, known internally as the phase pole. Alignment to planetary magnetic field lines, or external gravimetric curvature, ensures orientation stability. 5.2.2 Primary nucleation chamber. Suspended precisely at the zero torque node of the vorticity system is the primary nucleation chamber. This core node is where field coherence is first seeded, initiating conjugate plasma oscillations, Alf-Van wave scaffolding, and internal symmetry lock. It is here that symbolic command inputs from the codex are amplified into physical outcomes, manifesting as positional relocation, non-ballistic translation, temporal dilation or phase delay, access gating between cloaked and observable states. At 5.2.3 superconductive feedback shells. Encircling the nucleation zone are cryogenically regulated superconductive rings. Their functions are threefold. 1. Zero loss circulation of energetic instructions. 2. Phase locking of internal field harmonics. 3. Structural coherence maintenance across the glyph field interactions. These rings also enable rapid resonance realignment, allowing the entire system to adjust its internal frequency ladders in real time, a critical feature during operator intention shifts or environmental perturbation. 5.2.4 Metamaterial Damping Matrix. To prevent high energy leakage and field destabilization, a lattice of metamaterial layers surrounds the nucleation core. These are tuned to absorb X-ray, microwave, and Thirtz emissions, redirect thermal fluctuation harmonics, reinforce glyph symbol integrity by minimizing EM interference. The metamaterial matrix doubles as an observation cloak, ensuring that only designated observers, matched via codex symbolic keying, may detect the device in certain phase modes. 5.3 The Codex Interface, Symbolic Semantic Command System. Freya 66 is operated not with switches or joysticks, but through a symbolic semantic interface, known as the codex. This interface is a radiant-aligned, glyph-driven system in which each symbol represents a harmonic phase-state modifier, triggers a resonance pathway across the vorticity sheaths, and codes volitional intention into field command syntax. 5.3.1 Glyph Arrangement and Phase Encoding. Codex glyphs are arranged around a radian field lattice with specific angular positions correlating to frequency gates, e.g., 1.6 GHz downstepped into the audible range, dimensional vector directions, up, down, transverse, null, ontological effects, appearance, disappearance, stasis, dilation. Each operator must synchronize their cognitive state with the codex's base frequency harmonics to achieve functional control. The system is semi-sentient, requiring resonance lock rather than mechanical input. 5.3.2 Volitional Phase Matching. Operators undergo a resonance calibration sequence, matching their symbolic cognition to the system's feedback harmonics. Once phase locked, symbols act as modular command phrases, controlling location shift, observability, field pressure curvature, directional biasing within the toroidal envelope. The codex is both instrument and oracle. It listens, responds, and requires ethical intentionality as part of its operational integrity. 5.4 Structural Materials and Field Modulation Zones. Freya 66 is constructed using a composite of high permeability alloys for EM flux control, aerogel insulated vacuum segments to isolate harmonic bleed, superfluidic plasma channels for dynamic field tuning, diamondoid and carbon hexagonal lattice plates for mechanical support and quantum insulation. Each material component is integrated into the field design, not simply bolted onto it. The craft is a single energetic organism, built for harmonic field fidelity, not industrial convenience. 5.5 Internal environment and operator feedback. Within the central cavity, the operator experiences weightlessness, time phase dilation, subjective time compression or extension, auditory harmonics mapped from codex state feedback, visual field fluctuations tied to external phase shifts. Neurocognitive monitoring is passive. The system listens for volitional congruency, not biometric thresholds. Misalignment results in non-activation, not system failure, a built-in safeguard against incoherent intent. 5.6 Summary, Freya as engine and epistemic mirror. Freya 66 is a unified technology, a fusion of toroidal symmetry mechanics, quantum phase coherence, symbolic cognition, and intentional resonance. It does not merely move, it transforms space, engages with consciousness, and responds to symbol-encoded volition. It is, in essence, a mirror held to the operator's field integrity, amplifying or nullifying presence according to one's ability to think in harmonic alignment with the fabric of space-time itself. Chapter 6, Tempus Additum Geometry and Metric Framework. Counter-rotating vorticity, field stability optimization, and engineered spacetime curvature. 6.1 Introduction. engineering a sanctuary of time. The term tempus aeditum, the innermost sanctuary of time, describes both the topological cavity within Freya 66 and the operative function of its metric geometry. It is not a place but a dynamic state, made accessible through the precise orchestration of rotational fields, harmonic alignment, and symbolic phase coherence. Freya 66 achieves spacetime control by utilizing dual vertical axis vorticity engines housed within and orthogonal to the toroidal primary shells. These vertical vorticity structures counter-rotate relative to each other, creating a stationary central phase conduit that mimics black hole ergosphere behavior without gravitational collapse. The result is not time travel in the pop science sense, but temporal plasticity, dilation, phase delay, causal decoupling, and field anchoring. Hatchell 6.2 Vertical Axis Vorticity Pairing and Shear Nullification. The vertical component of Freya 66 geometry includes two plasma-based rotational tubes, one rotating clockwise, CW, and the other counterclockwise, CCW, centered on the z-axis of the toroidal structure. Why counter-rotate? To generate a zero-net angular momentum in the core, eliminating gyroscopic resistance, to create dynamic shear layers that stabilize field geometry during transition, to establish a null spin manifold at the phase core, nucleation point, necessary for intentional phase injection. The rotational shear between these vortices simulates frame dragging effects of the Kerr metric, but under electromagnetic, not gravitational, control. 6.3 Mathematical Stability Condition of Vorticity Geometry. Let R be the major radius of the toroidal shell, R be the minor radius of the toroidal cavity, omega CW, omega CCW be the angular velocities of the outer and inner plasma rings, omega V plus be the vertical vorticity velocities CW and CCW respectively. T be the phase field function within the nucleation chamber. Maximum phase stability is achieved when the total angular momentum vector field resolves to zero within the central cavity. Vec L total, Vec L toroidal, plus Vec vertical equals 0, with Vec L text toroidals out as ICWW dot IGUS name. Vec L text vertical equals J plus dot omega V plus omega V class, where IJ are the moments of inertia of the respective plasma fields. The minus signs reflect opposing directionality. Stability condition, ICW, omega scud fubuan, less scud sida omega CCW quad text teskida omega V plus equals jet omega V squared. These conditions ensure that the internal frame is inertially null, enabling the coherent modulation of phase states with no unintended energy torsion. Hatcher 6.4 Kerr metric analog and curvature engineering. The composite geometry of the toroidal vertical vorticity structure mimics a modified Kerr spacetime without singularity. Using the general Kerr metric, ds2 equals 1 minus left 1 frac 2 mimic road right, dt2 word frac 4 mars and theta, dt d phi plus frac rogue squared delta, d arc squared plus d arc squared, d theta squared cleft plus arma 2r sin 2 theta. Right? Sin 2 theta d phi squared. Freya simplifies this to a fluid rotational analog with effective mass m phi xt and angular momentum per unit mass a to r dot omega. The result is a curvature manifold where time and space are no longer orthogonal, but refracted through rotational harmonics. Chapter 6.5 Dynamic Phase Core, Temporal Dilation and Symbolic Phase Injection. The phase core, within the vertical axis vorticity convergence zone, is where time is most plastic. Here, the codex glyphs inject semantic phase shifts into the field, modulating time compression or dilation, forward or retrocausal field projection, selective memory anchoring within the localized environment. This explains reports of missing time, instantaneous disappearance, and cognitive bleed-through near UAP encounters. Freya 66 reproduces this effect deliberately, using counter-rotational phase geometry as the tuning dial. 6.6 Summary: The sanctuary as a rotating mirror of volition. The tempus item is not a wormhole or black hole. It is a volitional cavity of engineered curvature suspended within a null inertial frame defined by rotating geometry. Its function is simple: to reflect intention through field, to hold time like breath, to write with symbols in the curvature of space. Chapter 7 symbolic semantic field interfaces, codex glyph lattices, scalar time rates, and temporal distortion engineering in Freya. 7.1 Introduction: The language that bends the frame. At the center of Freya 66 operational philosophy is the premise that spacetime responds to meaning, not metaphorically, but directly, through structured harmonic encoding. Where traditional systems require mechanical control surfaces and inertial compensation, Freya 66 responds to semantically encoded volition structured through a language of glyphs, frequencies, and radian vector alignment. This system, referred to as the codex, is a nonverbal, non-symbolic interface mapped to energy state deformation vectors. Each glyph is a field command, initiating alterations not only in motion and phase visibility, but in the rate and direction of time itself. This chapter defines the glyph lattice, establishes the semantic structure of command symbols, and introduces a standardized method for encoding temporal distortion increments using SI-aligned scalar multiples, enabling reproducible and tunable time dilation or compression inside the nucleation field. Task 7.2, the codex glyph matrix and radian alignment. Freya's glyph system is arranged around the 12 radian lattice, described in Chapter 5. Each of the 12 glyph loci corresponds to one of the primary field harmonics, a resonant scalar time bias, e.g., dilation or acceleration, a semantic vector, appearance, stasis, nullification, translation, glyph structure. Each glyph consists of 1. Radian vector, defines the angular field orientation 2. Phase harmonic, binds the glyph to a carrier frequency, e.g. 1.6 GHz or its octaves. 3. Volitional coupling gate, the conscious resonance key required to activate it. 4. Temporal scalar coefficient, determines the rate of time passage within the field. Glyphs are written into the phase using modulated plasma density fluctuations along the toroidal cavity surface. The glyph is read not by software, but by the geometry of the field itself. 7.3 Encoding temporal distortion increments using scalar SI multiples. To standardize temporal field modulation, Freya 66 uses a dimensionless scalar system aligned to SI time base units, seconds, but expanded into relative scalar distortion rates. Temporal scalar index TSI, let T0 equals external world time rate, 1 per se. T tri equals internal time rate within Freya's core field. Tau equals scalar temporal distortion coefficient. Then TP equals tau T0, where tau 1, time acceleration, operator experiences faster time. Tau 1, time dilation, operator experiences slower time. In tau causal stasis, internal field freezes relative to external time. Tau 0, inverted causality, retrocausal feedback restricted. Table, scalar time distortion multiples, glyph code, radian sector, scalar coefficient, effect, extreme temporal dilation. A0, sector 1.0, synchronous time normal. D3, sector 4.5, time slows to 1/2 rate. S9, sector 8.01, extreme temporal dilation. T11, sector X 10.0, operator experiences 10 sec, ZEEP center node 0.0, full temporal stasis 6R, sector 12, minus 1.0, reverse temporal gradient for advanced applications only. Each glyph sets a temporal field resonance within the vorticity shell, altering the rate of field harmonic propagation and, by extension, subjective experience of time. 7.4 Symbolic volition as field logic. Unlike traditional programming languages, the codex functions by resonance coupling. The glyph only activates if the operator's cognitive phase space matches the glyph's harmonic profile. The semantic vector of intention is coherent and congruent. This means two operators cannot use the same glyph identically unless their intentional signature is phase matched. It is a system of meaning as syntax. Each codex command thus functions as both a field instruction and ontological check-in, validating operator coherence. This prevents weaponization or misuse by individuals whose intentional resonance would generate chaotic or incoherent spacetime alterations. 7.5 Frequency phase coupling and semantic integrity. The codex glyphs interface with a base harmonic carrier, e.g. 1.6 GHz, modulated through recursive division by powers of 2 to reach audible and subsonic frequencies, creating an auditory harmonic field aligned with glyph activation. Each glyph thus contains a visual radian geometry, a phonemic harmonic chord, a phase state signature, measurable as nonlinear waveform within the plasma. These combine to generate field fidelity, ensuring that glyphs are not just read, but felt. 7.6 Summary: the codex as reality interface. The codex is not symbolic in the abstract sense. It is the projective geometry of volition, encoded in glyphic syntax, harmonic modulation, and rotational symmetry. By aligning intention with field structure and symbol with scalar metric modulation, the operator of 666 enters a language-based contract with spacetime. They do not fly. They do not thrust. They speak, and reality bends. And complete version of Chapter 8, now fully integrating the concept of filamentary tethers, scalar phase state coherence, and astral projection as telemetric consciousness, grounded in the operational architecture of Freya 66. Chapter 8, Quantum Coherence and Phase State Engineering. Volitional telemetry, entangled filamentary tethers, and the scalar geometry of consciousness projection. 8.1 Introduction, From Phase Coherence to Non-Local Identity. Freya 66 is not merely a propulsion system. It is an interface for non-local consciousness modulation. At its core lies the ability to maintain quantum coherence between a localized biological operator and a phase-separated extension of awareness, an operational dynamic traditionally known as astral projection, reinterpreted here as telemetric cognitive bifurcation. Supported by phase-locked plasma geometries, conjugate standing wave structures, and a symbolic control system embedded in the codex, Freya 66 enables the safe projection of awareness beyond the device, while sustaining real-time bidirectional feedback via a structure traditionally described as the silver cord. 8.2 Astral Projection as Volitional Telemetry. In many esoteric and indigenous frameworks, astral projection, AP, is the directed separation of consciousness from the physical body, enabling observation or interaction with non-local domains. In Freya 66, this is modeled precisely. The biological body remains physically inert, nested within the superconductive chamber. The cognitive resonance pattern, consciousness, is bifurcated and extended into scalar fields external to the device. The two states remain linked via quantum phase entanglement, structured by the codex lattice and supported by plasma harmonic scaffolding. This is not symbolic. It is literal phase geometry bifurcation, enabled by engineered coherence. 8.3. The silver cord as an entangled scalar filament. Historically, the silver cord is depicted as a luminous, elastic tether that links the traveling consciousness back to the body. Freya 66 manifests this through a scalar filamentary tether, a phase-stabilized, entangled standing wave that maintains bidirectional telemetry, data return from the projection vector, causal integrity, time-aligned reentry capacity, semantic coherence, ensuring the projected self remains the operator. This filament is structured from quantum plasma standing waves, stabilized within the toroidal cavity, phase-indexed frequency braids, harmonized via codex glyphs, volitional imprint patterns, embedded as scalar morphogenic codes. Functionally, it behaves like a telemetric carrier wave, encoding the operator's identity across both space and time. 8.4 Physics Analogs, Entanglement, Timelessness, and Telemetry. Freya's system architecture enables a bridge between ancient metaphors and modern field physics. Quantum entanglement, consciousness and body remain phase correlated regardless of spatial separation. Special relativity, near light speed propagation in Freya's internal plasma suggests time dilation conditions where awareness exits linear time, described in many AP experiences. Telemetry, consciousness acts as a remote sensor array, transmitting field data, spatial structure, and symbolic signal back to the body. Thus, Freya functions as a telemetric consciousness architecture, wherein projection is not metaphorical. It is literal phase-based observation from a coherent alternate reference frame. 8.5 Temporal Scalar Modulation, Scalar Time Bands for Conscious Travel. Building on Chapter 7, temporal distortion coefficients, TIA, are applied to regulate the projection channel, TT at T0, where I0 is Earth normal time rate, is the internal rate experienced in projection. Tau 1 slows time, extended exploration window. Tau 1 accelerates perception, hyperspeed cognition. Tau equals 0 represents stasis. Operator's time ceases to flow relative to surroundings. These rates are imprinted into the projection channel via glyphic selection, allowing finely tunable access to expanded states. APE6 filamentary lattice, consciousness as scalar threadwork. The projection tether, the silver cord, is not singular, but filamentary. Each codex glyph, when used in projection mode, generates a filamentary braid of harmonic phase lines, microphase vectors linking operator identity to a phase-stable shell of plasma memory, a multidimensional lattice that mirrors spiderweb geometries as described in Native American, Siberian, and Amazonian traditions. These filaments are carrier lines for intention, redundancy threads for re-entry stabilization, energetic harmonics sustaining the phase hologram of the self in remote space. This structure is invisible to non-resonant perception, but measurable as subtle variations in toroidal plasma density, field luminosity, and harmonically locked vector fields. 8.7 indigenous correlates and interdimensional travel. Shamans of many traditions speak of being in two places at once, traveling across time and space on luminous threads, returning via webs, cords, or invisible paths. Freya 66 is internal geometry and codex syntax. Literalize these teachings into projective operations across radiant sector fields, codex-gated reentry nodes, glyph-synchronized return harmonics tied to operator intention. This affirms that ancient technologies of the spirit were not naive. They were symbolic expressions of phase state engineering, now reconstituted through physics. 8.8 Reentry protocols and consciousness restoration. To return from projection, Freya operators engage 1. Radian return glyph activation. 2. Phase lock recalibration, Te restored to 1.0. 3. Intent signature confirmation via glyphic mantra. 4. Filament compression and reintegration into local field. This prevents fragmentation, identity diffusion, or memory desync, failures known in esoteric lore as soul loss or astral misalignment. Freya does not allow phase separation without the semantic authority of volitional coherence. Chastra 8.9 Summary: A consciousness that walks on scalar threads. Freya 66 hosts not only a propulsion system, but a holographic phase body extension array, sustained through scalar filament braiding. The silver cord is thus neither myth nor symbol alone. It is the entangled scalar tether of the sovereign self, made walkable through harmonic alignment, codex structure, and conscious geometry. Freya lets the body remain. It lets the mind explore, and it ensures the self can return. Chapter 9, Observer Asymmetry in the Half-Silvered Mirror. Temporal distortion, electrogravitational lensing, and the aberration of light in phase-dominant systems. 9.1 Introduction, Seen but not seeing, Present but displaced. Freya 66 does not merely move through space, it distorts perception itself. Observers external to the device report apparent object vanishing or blinking in and out, light bending or contorting near the craft, presence without visibility, object sensed but not seen. Phase-locked silence in place of sonic shock. These are not optical illusions. They are electrogravitational consequences of the field architecture. The system generates temporal and spatial asymmetries in the observational relationship itself, what this chapter formalizes as the half-silvered mirror principle. 9.2 The half-silvered mirror as a model of observer displacement. A half-silvered mirror, in optics, allows light to pass in one direction while reflecting in another, a metaphor often used in quantum physics to model superposition and measurement uncertainty. In Freya 66, this metaphor becomes physical field engineering. Freya can be seen without being locatable, it can perceive without being perceived, it generates localized frame asymmetries that isolate the operator's frame from external observation. This occurs not through cloaking in the traditional sense, but through electromagnetically induced spacetime lensing. 9.3 Electrogravitational lensing. The curvature of observation, where Einstein predicted gravitational lensing, light curving around mass, Freya induces similar effects through electrogravitational coupling. In this architecture, The counter-rotating toroidal and vertical vorticity fields compress spacetime in specific radial sectors. Superconductive phase dampening amplifies field pressure on the electromagnetic fabric. This results in localized lensing effects, where incident light waves curve, shift, or diffuse depending on observer angle. These effects are angularly tunable via codex glyphs tied to observer phase vectors. For example, Sector 8 activates full phase opacity, Sector 9 binds visual return to a specific viewer's resonance signature. Sector 2 diffuses optical backscatter, creating ghosted apparitions. Thus, Freya can appear as a shifting orb, a pulsating field, a vanishing object, a mirrorless presence. 9.4 Temporal distortion and light aberration. Time and light are not separate in relativity. They co-define observation. Freya 66 exploits this by warping local time rates TAT to induce light aberrations. At tau 0.1, light reaching external observers is temporally displaced. This causes visual flickering, echo frames, or delayed presence. Light emitted from Freya is not frame synchronized with surrounding spacetime. This effect simulates hyperspeed or ghosting even when Freya is stationary in its own frame. The metric curvature delays emission synchronization, much like a warp bubble's boundary tension. Combined with electrogravitational lensing, this results in multi-image bifurcation, smeared observation planes, and non-reflective object masking. Hash 9.5 Observer asymmetry and directed observability. Freya's perceptibility is not a passive trait. It is an active field product. Using codex vector pairs, the operator can select observers who will see the craft, gate visual access to specific radar frequencies, induce scalar reflection fields that cancel return waves. In this structure, observability becomes consent-based. The craft determines whether and how it will be seen. This is structurally identical to quantum decoherence, where the act of observation collapses the wave function. Freya modulates this by predetermining the observer field through semantic harmonic gates. 9.6 Practical implications for UAP observation reports. Many UAP sightings align with optical asymmetric properties. Object blinked out as I stared equals phase opacity shift. Radar saw it, but we didn't. Equals electrogravitational radar transparency. Multiple pilots saw different positions. Frame dislocated light convergence. It was there but not casting light. Temporal frame mismatch in emission. These are not anomalies, they are expected outcomes of engineered phase geometry. Freya does not vanish, it displaces the metric of viewability. 9.7 Summary, Perception as a Phase Contract. Freya, 66, teaches us that what is seen depends on where and when you are looking from. The system's capacity to create asymmetric observational frameworks through electromagnetically induced spacetime curvature, temporal distortion of photon travel paths, observer-specific field resonance gates allows it to exist outside the expectation of mutual visibility. It sees you. You might not see it. And that imbalance is not error. It is design. Chapter 10, Ethical Implications, Disclosure, and Control Structures. The Necessity of Civilian Research in the Age of Forbidden Technologies. 10.1 Introduction. The Mirror of Disclosure is Cracked. Freya 66 exists in a liminal space, the edge between breakthrough and erasure. The physics, metaphysics, and symbolic mechanics described in this thesis are not inventions in the conventional sense. They are reclamations, refinements of lines of inquiry forcibly buried by institutional, military, and epistemic inertia. Governments, in concert with industrial stakeholders, have not merely withheld findings from the public, they have intentionally sabotaged pathways to coherence. The control of UAP-related technologies, consciousness field interface studies, and symbolic semantic systems has been classified not only for national security, but for ideological security. That is, to protect the authority of reductionist paradigms against the rise of human volition as an engineering principle. This chapter makes the case that civilian research, when freed from academic gatekeeping and state secrecy, is the only viable domain for the full development and ethical deployment of technologies like Freya, 66. SOT 10.2, the strategic suppression of contact-grade physics. The evidence presented in previous chapters From the Kerr analog geometry of the toroidal system, to the phase-state bifurcation of cognitive filaments, to the observer-locked visual asymmetry of light, clearly implicates that Freya 66 principles are functionally parallel to observed UAP behavior. And yet, these principles are excluded from mainstream physics. Funding for anti-gravitational, phase engineering, or symbolic field work is non-existent in academia. Open publication of related discoveries is quietly discouraged or intercepted via soft censorship, journal rejection, or bureaucratic entanglement. This is not accident. It is epistemic warfare. The systems that define the permissible boundaries of truth are structured to maintain dependence on industrial and military hierarchy, where only authorized science becomes real. Freya 66 cannot evolve under those constraints. It must grow in the hands of sovereign minds. 10.3 Civilian Research as the Ethical Axis. Civilian researchers, tinkerers, autodidacts, indigenous knowledge carriers, experiencers, and rogue scientists occupy a crucial position in the rebirth of what this thesis terms volitional physics. Only civilians can experiment with non-institutional metaphysics, can pursue symbolic semantic models without academic ridicule, can engage with experiential data, CE5, NDEs, DMT contact, without needing materialist reduction, can treat intention, glyphs, cognition, and phase symmetry as practical operators, not philosophical curiosities. In the absence of civilian exploration, the entire enterprise becomes militarized, commoditized, weaponized, culturally sterilized. Freya 66 is a technology of internal reflection and transdimensional navigation. It cannot be weaponized without being broken. It must be developed by the same consciousness it intends to extend, not by those who would reduce it to leverage. 10.4 Transparency, Epistemic Sovereignty, and Participatory Design. Unlike centralized research platforms, civilian researchers can work under principles of radical transparency, share all findings, regardless of disruption. Epistemic sovereignty, determine the validity of experience without external validation. Participatory design, create systems with and for the operator, rather than to control them. This mirrors how Freya functions, not as a black box, but as a mirror of intention. The machine is not a weapon, it is a language. Those who would use it must first learn to speak it, and no one speaks the truth more clearly than those who have nothing to lose. 10.5 Moral Responsibility of Access, why this cannot be classified. There is a real risk that Freya 66, or parallel systems, could be reconstructed behind closed doors. The physics is real. The implications are provable. The temptation is overwhelming. But in secret hands, it becomes a surveillance tool, a psychotronic manipulator, a cloak of gods used by predators. To prevent this, the entire framework of Freya 66 must remain open source in principle, decentralized in implementation, symbolically sovereign, i.e., no control without full operator symbolic alignment. The codex interface, in particular, is both a power and a guardrail. It ensures that only those in harmonic resonance with its meaning can activate advanced states. This is the fail-safe built into symbolic physics. You cannot fake intention. You cannot command what you do not understand. 10.6 Summary: The future cannot be patented. Freya 66 exists because the world's most powerful institutions have failed to act in good faith. It now falls to the periphery, the citizen engineers, the forgotten dreamers, the underground alchemists of consciousness, to carry it forward. The device is not ours, it is everyone's. Its language is not proprietary, it is ancestral. Its power is not mechanical, it is ethical. This work is a call, not a claim. What follows will not be funded by DARPA or controlled by a corporation. It will be built by those who remember how to listen to symbols, to light, and to the shape of their own attention. Let the record show, the technology was not stolen. It was ignored. And now it is returning to those who never forgot it. With Chapter 11, Conclusions and Future Work. The world is what we make it good. 11.1, The Threshold Crossed. Freya 66 is not only a theoretical framework, it is the encoded memory of a possibility humanity has long carried and often buried. This thesis has traced the suppressed physics, reclaimed the geometry, restored the symbolic architecture, and seeded the harmonic maps by which we may now begin the reconstruction of a volitional interface with reality itself. This is no longer about propulsion. It is about presence, not about speed, but sovereignty, not about evasion, but emergence. Freya 66 is not an escape vehicle. It is a reflection system, a lens of motion, time, meaning, and selfhood. It does not promise safety from the world. It offers the ability to reshape it from the inside out. Nshash 11.2, a summary of functional integration. Across these chapters, we have demonstrated that toroidal vorticity geometries, nested and counter-rotating, can form the foundation of a null inertial mobility field. The tempus addendum is a coherent phase cavity capable of field curvature and temporal dilation through scalar modulation. Codex glyphs serve as the symbolic semantic operators, encoding volition into command syntax for phase state reality modulation. The so-called silver cord is a scalar filament, the entangled cognitive tether that enables bidirectional consciousness projection. Observer asymmetry, light aberration, and electrogravitational lensing create consensual observability, not default exposure. And above all, that civilian knowledge stewardship is not optional, it is essential, Freya. Emerges not from institutional decree, but from the cumulative will of those who remember what truth sounds like before it is translated. 11.3, the ethical compass and creative mandate. This technology and all others that follow in its wake must be treated with the utmost intentional alignment. The Codex is not merely functional, it is moral. It requires of its operator clarity of symbol, integrity of volition, resonance with that which it seeks to touch. If you lie to it, it will not move. If you hate, it will not open. If you forget what you are, it will close the field. In this way, Freya 66 is not only a machine, it is a teacher. It will only amplify what you already carry. It will not protect you from yourself. So make yourself good. Not morally pure, but harmonically honest. Not perfect, but present. The world is what we make it. Make it good. Let your symbols be clear. Let your intentions echo. Let your walk become your waveform. 11.4 Paths Forward, the next frequencies. This document lays only the first stone. The work ahead includes codex prototype mapping to calibrate symbolic syntax with harmonic frequency scaffolds, toroidal plasma ring experimentation using high-temp superconductors and resonant cavity isolation, glyph-to-phase coherence analysis, mapping semantic intention to observable energetic fluctuation, public field lab frameworks for non-institutional group testing of resonance, field modulation, and contact protocol, cross-disciplinary alliance building among physicists, engineers, artists, mystics, indigenous knowledge holders, and experiencers. No single group owns this. No one school will complete it. This is a convergence, not a conquest. 11.5 The closing arc, a final glyph. In the codex, there is one symbol not used to command, but to remember. It represents restoration. It looks like a spiral coiled around a vertical axis, a filament winding back into a heart. It means you are the field, you are the mirror, you are the bridge. Let this be the last glyph of this thesis, not as punctuation, but as invitation. Let there be light. Let there be clarity. Let there be will aligned to wisdom. Let us begin.